Hey guys, welcome to another leadership podcast. Today, my guest is Shira Litwack. Shira is the author of Successful Body, and she's also coach and mentor, and she's speaker as well on both health and wellness program. Welcome to our podcast, Shira.
It's so nice to be here. I'm so excited you asked me.
Oh, thank you. This is one of the area where before COVID, we never thought it'll become so critical for any business, health and wellness, and then now we're at the point where business just won't survive without it. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'm looking forward to learning from you today. So tell us a little bit, what do you do, and if you can just walk us through how you help out businesses.
Sure. Okay, well, there's a couple of ways. Number one is at the heart of it all, I'm a hardcore science geek. So I just thought
Mhm.
I would put that out there. As I say in my bios everywhere, the last time I read a novel was in university because I had to.
Okay.
And I emphasize that. A couple of friends asked me to, a couple of my girlfriends asked me to read, what was it called, 50 Shades of Grey, because I said, "Oh, Shira, it's so good. You're going to love it." I made it to the second page and I said, "Yeah, no, I
Had
can't."
enough.
Uh, so I am a science geek. Love reading studies, love keeping up with current research. I have to say, through this pandemic, the science, the real science, I'm not calling the pop science, but the real science has been absolutely fascinating and everything to do with my absolute passion of talking about chronic inflammation. So everything I do is science based, as well as I. I want to say this very nicely and not to offend anyone. I believe it's up to all of us, especially if we have the constant uh, firing of stress on us as business leaders. I talk a lot about taking charge of your own health and not being at the mercy of the healthcare system. Now, that's not necessarily, I'm not insulting the healthcare system, but there's so much far beyond the pop science that you read out there about eat right and exercise. That's very superficial, which is actually what got me into my research into chronic inflammation, is wanting to dig deeper.
Mhm.
So basically, based on that desire, I still do a lot of work in my love of chronic inflammation, that I was involved in many research projects many,
Mhm.
many years ago. Still keep up with them. As well as I also work actually with a company out of the United States, supplying home test kits to people on all kinds of wellness and infectious diseases, because it kind of sits exactly with how I feel that we all have to take charge, not leave it to that 15, 20 minutes we have with our family doctor once a year until there's a problem.
Mhm.
So, that's kind of where I'm at with
Mhm.
what I do, and what my focus is in health.
I see. So you work with a lot of business leaders.
Yes.
Even myself included. Before COVID, we thought health and safety is one of those things that we just need to get a handle on. But it was on top of the list. That is so critical. But with the COVID, we know that not only your health and safety, but also your staff's health and safety becomes so critical. It just is, for a lot of businesses, it's a survival. So where you see that how business leaders are changing directions on that, how they're treating health and wellness, any change in a behavior, any expectation changes from business leadership standpoint, what do you see in the market?
I do see a change. However, I would like to see, because I was hoping you'd ask that, I would
Mm.
like to see more of an evolution over time. I think that the pandemic started it out of reaction, but I
Mhm.
would like to see it keep going. I think that people have had to become much more independent with their health, and employers have had to think very differently and very creatively.
Mhm.
However, I'd like to see that continue. I'd like to see um, employers far beyond, as I said before, the eat right and exercise, because that just opens a Pandora's box of more. I would like to see people focus on that and keep it going to where we do take more charge and understand more of really what's at the root of our health and what we are doing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I mean, researching by, for our discussion a little bit, I started looking at inflammation a little bit. And, one of the professor I was looking at, Robert, I just want to make sure that I get the name right, Roger Schultz. He's, clinical professor at the University of California. And I was watching his interview, and he mentioned that inflammation is a root cause of all the major diseases that our generations are dealing with, including cancer or blood pressure or blood sugars or any other diseases. It's all starts from inflammation. If you can talk about from your standpoint, is that what it is, or what are your thoughts on inflammation? Because you deal with that quite a bit.
100% what he said, but if I can just expand on that, which I'm sure he did, it's also at the heart of mental health. And we know that mental health, especially with the pandemic, and I mean, it was beforehand as well, but mental health we really need some more support there. And chronic inflammation is absolutely at the root of mental health issues as well. Depression, anxiety, mood swings, because it so vastly affects our hormones in so many different ways. So yes, absolutely, it's at the root. And it's interesting because you did mention I was a co-author on a book, The Successful Body. And so I explain it there in the nuts and bolts and really breaking it down. Mm-hmm. But chronic inflammation, let's put it this way. Many of us like to think we're doing the right things. Mm-hmm. We think we're eating the right foods. We think we're exercising the right amount. And the truth is, until you learn to really understand chronic inflammation in your own body and what's happening and recognize the signs that we're doing something to control it, that really a lot of our self-prescribed, or what some of these, wonderful gurus out there tell us, we actually can be increasing our levels of chronic inflammation. So for instance, let's take a very simple example. If you look at these large endurance competitions, they've been studied, oh my gosh, I don't know how many times with respect to chronic inflammation. Now, I'm going to tell you exercise is the greatest thing on earth, the greatest thing that we can do for ourselves. I'm a huge gym rat. I live in the country now. I built a gym in my home. Okay. So I'm a huge supporter of it. However, people have to understand that this mentality, if some is good, more must be better, is not always the case. And in fact, if you examine genomic profiles on people, there's actually a profile of person that really shouldn't have hard, exhaustive exercise. It actually increases their level of chronic inflammation. Now, I just want to back up here for a second. Inflammation is a vital part of our body's response. So let's say we hurt ourselves and we cut ourselves, and then our body rushes to the scene of the accident and tries to fix it up. Sure, that's a really, really, really important thing. However, when the body persists and keeps attacking it, then we can move into a problem. And what happens is we live in a very, very pro-inflammatory world. Whether you want to look at the levels of pollution, oh my goodness, some of the foods we eat, another whole topic, another whole show right there. And so we do definitely live in a pro-inflammatory world. And what we have to really understand is if we're controlling those levels of, and I keep saying chronic inflammation because regular inflammation is a good thing. It's a necessity of the body. It's the chronic persistent inflammation that we have to make sure we keep under control.
So regular inflammation, we need that. That's good for body.
Absolutely.
I get you. So is that inflammation in a certain part of the body that is not good, or is it all over the body? I know which one is, any inflammation there, what part of the body is good, what part of the body is not good, or is it just that just regular is good and chronic is not good?
Right from the cells.
Okay.
So our cells and how our cells react to um, different things that increase our levels of inflammation. I want to keep this very straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
That is how our cells react.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a number of things. Again, our body is equipped with lots of ways when we're younger to try and control inflammation. But there's a couple of things that happen. Number one is we get older. Okay, that's a good thing. Okay, but as we get older, our body's defenses against inflammation can decrease, as well as, again, as I was saying, the constant bombardment we get from our environment over, causing more inflammation in the body is a serious issue. And when you look at the levels of cancer and heart disease, they can all be traced back to chronic inflammation. Macular degeneration, people look at as a fact of life.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily. The question is understanding the age of our cells. So there's a question out there in the science world, which is a little bit confusing, but what it is does aging cause disease, or does disease cause aging? So when you have chronic inflammation that has built up over time, and again, that time will differ between people, when that happens, okay, then we have disease. And we normally associate disease with aging. But now the question is being asked, and it's absolutely the best research, and they can have their 50 Shades of Grey. I'll take the research on this much better. The question really, does the disease cause us to age?
Interesting. Very interesting. What do you think? Does pandemic has anything to do with the inflammation?
Everything. COVID? Sorry for answering that so quickly and succinctly. Absolutely. First of all, what we've seen is that what research proved a couple of months after the pandemic started, the research started coming out. And again, I have lots of these articles quoted on my website, Best in Corporate Health. What COVID did is it caused depending on which side of the border you're on, cytokine or cytokine storm within the body, which is basically a storm of chronic inflammation. And, attacked the lungs, the respiratory system. In fact, it's thought that a lot of people who did actually have COVID could possibly have respiratory damage for life. So it is serious. And I have to tell you, I got really upset when people fought the protocol. I mean, personally, I got to tell you, I thought it was the greatest thing wearing masks. So, no colds, no flu, no bronchitis, no anything. So, it's very upsetting when you have the science of how this virus transmits. When people were fighting the masks, and making it into a political issue and what their rights are and all of this type of thing, it's very, very frustrating. But it's a very difficult thing for employers, because employers, obviously, they have to protect their people. Okay. And on the other hand, they don't want to ignore what their people want. So I actually felt sorry for them. I mean, when you have a large company that was, still is, managing the COVID pandemic is very difficult. But yes, chronic inflammation has everything to do with our body's reaction to the virus.
So if you give us a little bit of insights on how does somebody diagnose, or find out if they have a chronic inflammation in a body, and how do you prevent it? If is that where you're a lot of speaking engagement goes? Is that where you educate people, or is it a different area of somebody has a diagnosis where they have inflammation, and how do they treat it, or how do they prevent it?
Great question. There's a couple of things there. Number one is you can get blood tests.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in Canada, I don't see doctors testing for these things automatically. Number one is you want to have your C-reactive protein, otherwise known as CRP, checked in your blood tests, which is one of the markers of inflammation. The other thing is, hey, and in Canada, I don't get why we don't test for this automatically, is your vitamin D levels. Vitamin D is so important for us for so many reasons. And in my opinion, one of the most important reasons is fighting inflammation. And it's simple blood test. And we used to have a view of what a normal, I love that word normal, what a normal level of vitamin D in the body is. And over the years, that number has evolved. Okay, to be, well, that's okay to get by. But if you're in the cancer prevention world and you're dealing with someone with cancer, they want those vitamin D levels to be higher. Okay, and so again, we live in Canada. We're not exactly gifted in the sunshine department. And not only that, and hey, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. People slather on sunscreen. Okay, blocks a lot of the vitamin D. That's everybody's choice, how they want to handle that. But again, we seriously have to look at getting vitamin D. Now, we can say we get vitamin D in our diet. Well, let's talk about fish. Let's talk about dairy. Those are wonderful, but how much of the world has turned to a dairy-free diet? Not going there. But it's very hard to get enough of it from the diet. It's not so easy to absorb because, again, it's one thing what we eat, it's another thing what our body will actually absorb. And a lot of that has to do with chronic inflammation in the intestinal tract that we probably don't know is there. Okay, so I think number one is always have your C-reactive protein. There's some other ones, like for instance, having your homocysteine checked. There's a number of other ones, but I really recommend people talk to their doctors about whatever means they have for checking their levels of chronic inflammation. That's number one. Number two is if you don't get a lot of sleep and you're a person who feels that things aren't right. We've all had that feeling before where we're overly stressed. We're not handling stress as well as we used to. That to me is a trigger. And you're not going to hurt yourself by trying to be prudent. And again, there's many, many ways of lowering your levels of chronic inflammation. Okay. Now, again, I want to stress, you don't want people, let me give you a good example. My mom has not been doing well for a long time, complications of diabetes. And she was we thought she was going to leave this world much earlier this year. And her doctor put her on a very aggressive medication called prednisone. You might have heard of it before. Okay. And I thought it was a good thing. And my brother, who's a physician, was very wary of it because he says the prednisone, even at very low dosages, can fight inflammation so much, depending on the person and how it's processed in their body, that it can stop any of the body's inflammatory responses that can be good, So lo and behold, she started having problems with getting pneumonia. And it was thought that she was on too much because she didn't have enough of it. So it's finding that balance. And I firmly believe no one should ever medicate themselves. But there's just an example that you need some kind of inflammatory response in the body. Again, the problem is when it goes on and on and on and on and on, it doesn't know when to quit. So, yeah, so if you're really not feeling right and something's wrong, I personally think checking vitamin D levels and checking C-reactive protein and other inflammatory markers that your doctor wants to do, I think are very important for people to do. As well as I think people have to do, and something I do in my business with clients is I analyze what's going on in their life and a number of markers they do. And what we do is we talk about, okay, where can we cut back on those external sources that really can encourage us to increase our levels of chronic inflammation. So I just advise people, look, yeah, I do work with a supplement, but it's approved by, it's got 30 studies on it, you know, like impartial, like NIH type of thing. But there's a lot out there that people take and people pop that have no science behind it. And I really caution people to be very careful of that. If people are not taking vitamin D3, speak to their physician, have their levels of vitamin D tested, and consider taking an oil, little tiny oil capsules, not the tablets. Again, your body won't absorb that as well, but the little tiny oil caplets. And it's a fat soluble vitamin, so it has to be taken with a little bit of fat, like the cream in your coffee or whatever, so it can be absorbed by the body.
Your body doesn't have a mechanism to produce vitamin D3, right? It can produce other, but vitamin D is something it doesn't produce, I guess, right?
It's very, very, very hard for the body, and especially it really needs, like me, good old sunshine, you know? And in Canada, we are heading into those months where we don't see the sun so much.
Till February.
I just want to say that doesn't give us, a get out of jail for free card to go and sit there and bask in the sunlight, and fry ourselves. Absolutely not. Wow. Talk about increasing chronic inflammation. But everything is about finding that balance.
I see. So it's not vitamin C's that, everybody says a flu season, boost up your vitamin C. It's not that, but it's vitamin D that what is more important.
It's very interesting you say that, because I don't want to tell people not to take their Flintstone vitamins or take their vitamin C or whatever it is. But I have to say the many, many, many studies that I've read, of course, vitamin C is necessary for every single enzymatic reaction that happens in the body. Okay. Vitamin C is critical. Number one is, oh my gosh, it's so abundant in food. Can we not eat our fruits and vegetables and get our vitamin C that way?
Loaded with that,
Yeah. And the other thing is vitamin C doesn't last too long in the body. So when people take these mega doses, I'm going to try and say this very ladylike, it's really the toilet that prospers. It leaves our system very, very quickly. And so it's really important not for people just to eat their fruit, let's say once in a day, to have certain things like tomatoes. And there's lots of, our fresh fruits and veggies. Unfortunately, cooking does tend to denature vitamin C. But, and there's certain vegetables which are very hard on the body to eat raw. So you really have to, again, analyze and take a look at where we're getting our vitamin C levels from. But in terms of cold preventions and that kind of thing, well, it's always good to stay healthy. And the stronger we are, the better off we're going to be in fending off these things. But to say, where people say that taking mega doses of vitamin C will stop them from getting a cold or this, that, or help them recuperate, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. But yes, vitamin C is necessary for every single thing that goes on in the body.
Interesting. So let's talk about businesses. Business leaders now. Definitely among my. I'm part of that group as well. Not only worried about our own health, but our families and our staff's families, and everybody's now working in the same office. I know stress levels are high. I recently read a study versus mental health is issues are on a rise as well. People, what people have gone through with the pandemic. What can business leaders do? How should they approach this health and wellness in a corporate world? And how can they, what is their, side of things they have to take care of to make sure that everybody's in their teams are healthy so we can move the businesses forward?
Are we addressing if people are working from home or when we bring them back into the office?
Both. Stress levels
Both.
the
Okay.
same. Even coming back in the offices, there's it's going to be higher stress level. We haven't driven for last year and a half now. We're going back to a road again.
Oh, good old
Definitely
traffic.
any change that to
Oh, the
work environment.
400. I don't miss the
Exactly.
400.
So stress level is always going to be higher. Working at home now, we lost a social aspect of working together. That definitely brings a stress level that are higher as well, right? When you're working from in front of a computer. So what can business leaders do, to help their staff and help their families? What can they do to make sure everybody is healthy? Because they need that in order to move a business forward, right? They're going to need that work to carry it out so they can grow their revenues again.
There's so much that can be done. First of all, I would like to give you kudos for
Hmm.
bringing up the very, very, very important point
Thank
of
you.
people working from home and the mental health aspects of it and the loneliness. And that has become another pandemic within a pandemic. There's no
Hmm.
question. I mean, it's very nice to speak to people on Zoom,
Right.
and thank goodness we had it before the pandemic. But we're social creatures
Yep.
and we definitely need the interaction. So that's very, very important. I think one of the most important things to do is I personally think coming back to the workplace as much as possible is a wonderful thing to give people the social aspect. And let's face it, not everybody is designed to work from home. Not everybody has the
Hmm.
discipline for work from home. And that obviously is going to take a toll on employers. If people don't have the discipline to work from home and to be just as faithful as if they were sitting at work,
Hmm.
and having that same kind of faithfulness to their work. So there's no question that's an issue. I think what employers really, really need to do is they need to, again, I'm going to try and say this very nicely. A lot of employers have gotten onto these wellness platforms
Hmm.
and people log on and they answer questions and they talk about what they do. The problem with a lot of these platforms, and I know a lot of them, is they're very good for the worried well. They're very good for people who are already involved in looking after their health. Where they're not so great is beckoning in people to kind of embrace it. So I think one of the first things to do is employers really need to find a way, and there are many ways they can do this, to empower people to understand more about their health and take a proactive approach. So,
Hmm.
for instance, how many people have really ever seen their blood results? How many people really understand what they mean? So, small example, I always encourage people to speak to your doctor's office and get that requisition done before your doctor's appointment. And then by the time you get there for your appointment, those blood results are back. I believe everybody should get copies of their blood work and they
Hmm.
should understand what it means. And even the blood tests are wonderful. Life Labs or whoever does it, they give you a little range that the number should be in. Now, it doesn't mean, no, we never, ever, ever diagnose ourselves, okay? But people to understand, look at this. My LDL, my lousy cholesterol, has been
Hmm.
going up every year. or understand, look, this number called CRP, C-reactive protein, is out of range. And what happens very often is physicians will say, and I understand they're busy and most of them are far too overworked, they'll say, I'll call you if there's a problem. I don't like that answer. I believe everybody should understand what their blood is telling them. And I think there's a lot of ways. So for instance, something that I do is, I lead webinars for employers to help people understand how they can help their employees take more control of their health. Not to leave it to some platform that some people just kind of log in to show they've logged in, leave it going for a while, walk away. I learned all the tricks that people did. Hey, there's people who give their COVID test to someone else. If they think they're having symptoms, they'll give it to someone else and have someone else take their swab for them. Terrible. And so, people will always find a way. And, when companies were great, where someone gave me a free gym membership and they were very kind and generous and gave people free gym memberships, what did people do? They go in and they swipe their card and then they leave. Okay, to show that they've done it. And I think what they need to do is have to really get people more involved in their health. And no one likes to go, a lot of employers don't like to go back to the route of interactive webinars and things like that, because it's not a platform you just give people, which costs you about 50 cents a life, and then have people do that.
Yeah.
Okay, with the same blah, blah, blah. And forgive me, a lot of those platforms, the information they give is so superficial. And eat your fruits and vegetables. Gee, I never knew to eat my fruits and vegetables. Okay. I mean, so again, it's trying to get them motivated. And also when you have activities, tell me why, and please don't hang up on me after I say this. You're a nice guy. I'd like to continue. When people plan group events and employers plan group events, why is it at a party with all kinds of alcohol and people off to the sides outside smoking? Why is it not? And I just want to say one thing. Alcohol is a carcinogen. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to put it so bluntly. These studies that were done years ago that a glass of wine a day is good for your heart. Oh my gosh, can you think of more heart healthy activities than having a glass of carcinogens? And besides, what is good? Excuse me taking this detour.
No worries.
And what is good in that alcohol for you, in that red wine everybody talks about, is the resveratrol, which is an antioxidant. It's a wonderful antioxidant. But when you do what I call alcohol math, and realize how much red wine you have to get enough resveratrol, I think your liver would have something to say about that. Okay, so again, I would like to see employers, and yes, in Canada too, where we don't exactly have outdoors weather 12 months a year, I would like to see employers. And I think social activities are massive for a company's success. Absolutely massive. I would like to see companies to see them do more interactive events, not just the health fair and the cafeteria that people go to, but real interaction with their people that's based on health. And when we're fully back to, hopefully very soon, really having that kind of social environment, I'd really like to see those happen. And there's many wonderful ideas people can do for that. But I think it's that culture that when you think that people, what's the current statistic now? I mean, it's hard with people working from home, but I think it was 2/3 of a person's life is spent at work. Is that what it is?
Around that, I think that's, considering 40 hours every week we spend,
Yeah. And so it's around 2/3 of a person's life. and lots of people work more than 40 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I know at-home work has changed things dramatically there. But again, I'd like to see employers do far more fun. Oh my gosh, fun is huge. I believe people can't learn if they're not having fun. It's just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
It have far more social activities where health is at the root of it, not
Mm-hmm.
alcohol. I mean, look at the companies who really prospered during the pandemic. Netflix and alcohol sales.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And, why was the liquor store considered a vital service when everything else was closed?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of have an
Yeah.
issue with
Yeah.
that.
So it's not information only is important. What you're saying, we have to get people involved and engage into in the activities so they can understand and they can take care of themselves and their families as well.
And I think if people, let's say you have a person who's told by their doctor that their heart health isn't great. Let's say it's cholesterol or blood pressure, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just popping, okay, I'm not going to tell people not to take their blood pressure. No, I'm not saying that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want people to do is take a look at what could have caused that high blood pressure. And guaranteed, there's some chronic inflammation going on
Mm-hmm.
that caused that high blood pressure. Okay.
See.
And that's what people need to take a look at. Yeah. People should, we have everybody, steps on a scale. Why don't people, even if your blood pressure is good, why don't people have they're affordable enough, their own blood pressure machine? You
Mm-hmm.
can get these blood pressure machines now. I have one. It's an iHealth device, medical device, hooks up to my iPhone. And not that I need to, I check my blood pressure. I figure, you know what? I'm 60 years old. I should be checking my blood pressure. I've been doing it for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what? I'm the only one in my family without high blood pressure. So you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely there.
Yeah.
So I think people need to look at these markers far earlier before there's a problem. Let me give you another good example, which I hope will be very helpful for your listeners. Let's talk about, please forgive me, erectile dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Erectile dysfunction can most definitely, not always, say that there's something going on underneath with respect to the heart and circulation. Mm-hmm. Maybe people need to take a look at their levels of chronic inflammation, see what they can do. And if you do like an inventory of what in your life is causing chronic inflammation, well, okay, I can cut that out. I can ease up on that. Yeah, I can cut back on the booze. Don't want to, but I can. Okay. Whatever they can possibly do. So there's many, many signs which we just assume are aging, but they don't have to be. And it can often be something that's leading to something else. So you want people to kind of take a look at those, have a discussion with your doctor, have a discussion with a naturopath, and really understand what's available to them and get to that root cause. I had the privilege a number of years ago with working with a wonderful, brilliant oncologist in the Chicago area, Dr. Keith Block. And he's got the Block Integrative Center for Integrative Oncology. And, he talks about cancer, people cut out tumors. And once when I was doing an interview with him, he says, yeah, okay, so you cut out a tumor, big deal. What caused that tumor? What's the mechanism behind it? That's what you need. So, I compared it to a game of whack-a-mole. You ever go to the CNE or anywhere and you play whack-a-mole thing and you bop it down, right? Because they very often pop up. But if you're not getting to the root cause, then you're not dealing with the situation.
So look into root cause, get to the bottom of the problem and treat that instead of just trying to treat the symptoms of it.
Yeah. And I'd like to see employers take a much deeper role into, let's face it, people spend a lot of their time at work, as we were saying before, and I'd like to see employers kind of really do things with their populations that encourage people to dig deeper. There's a lot people can do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a fun buster. There's a lot of fun things people can do and interactive things people can do, and they're very, very good for their health and help people understand. I've never once, other than the employers I've worked for, I've never seen employers deal with chronic inflammation.
Interesting.
Oh, okay, here's your gym membership. Which is great. Almost understand me. That's very appreciated. But I think we need to encourage people to take a deeper look.
So how do you help out business leaders? People who are listening to, business leaders who are, watching us. How do you help out businesses if somebody needs some help or somebody needs some information? How do you help them out?
What I personally do is I will work with employers to work with their employees to do interactive. I don't like doing pre-recorded. I'm sorry. That's the same as a platform. Did you ever watch Charlie Brown? And remember the teacher? Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
I don't do pre-recorded.
Yeah.
I do live and interactive so people can ask questions, and yes, lots on Zoom. And people can still interact with each other. And I think that's very, very, very important. If people want to send questions privately, I let them send them before. We talk about, I'll send them, give them a couple of choices of what they'd like to talk about. What I like to encourage people to do beforehand is, I'll give them questions that I want them thinking about. And to kind of write notes to themselves beforehand, before we get into this conversation. But yeah, that's what I do a lot of. And, if people want to know more about certain things, right vitamins to take, right supplements to take, I can talk with them on that, which ones they're wasting their money on. And so that's what I really like to focus on is like, okay, so you have your doctor that you speak to about your blood pressure, about your high blood sugar, or whatever it is. Now let's dig deeper. Let's get to the roots of that nasty little thing, and say, okay, what are we going to do to work on those roots? Again, asking the question, Dr. David Sinclair from Harvard, fabulous book. It's been out a little bit over a year, and he talks about the fact that does aging cause disease, or does disease call aging? And when people talk about anti-aging, I laugh at some of these commercials, about anti-aging face creams and anti-aging this, and anti-aging has become such a cliche.
It sells.
But that's the facade. You've got to look underneath the facade and what's going on inside the cells. Is our body clearing all of those dead cells? Okay. What is our body doing what are our cells able to do to regenerate? Are we encouraging that, or are we unknowingly discouraging that? And that also really helps with, sure, productivity is a major issue in the workplace. And when we understand where productivity comes from, and helping people with that, being able to focus, I think is something that a lot of people take for granted, and obviously I think focus has quite a bit to do with productivity,
of course.
So, it's sure, a good night's sleep is huge, but there's even more that we can do.
Very interesting. So let's talk about you, Shira. How does somebody inspired to be in health and wellness side? How did you get involved into health and wellness? If you just walk through your journey.
I actually like that question. I got involved because when I was a teenager, I led these classes in gyms, for step class and aerobics and all of that. And as I got older, meaning my later 20s, I started so old, right? I started realizing that, why is this working? Why does it work for some people more? Why does it work for some people less? And then you ask yourself the question, which all of us have asked.
Mm-hmm.
We've all known this person that we thought was super healthy. This person who exercised, who ate a perfect diet. Again, another whole show. And did everything right. And still somehow that person got an awful disease. Now there's congenital things, no question, not disputing that. But when you look at what the data is telling us, that disease, I mean, depends who you read, they all have a different number, is about 80 to 85% our environment and our choices, and anywhere from 10% seems to be the average of what people say is genetics. And then we have the whole study of epigenetics. How do we actually, with our choices and behaviors, how are we actually changing our genes? How are we getting genes to express themselves? How are we suppressing certain genes? Now, again, no question, certain part is genetically programmed. Okay. But so it's really important that when I started getting into fitness, I just started asking many, many more questions. As I got older, and then as I started to get to realize certain people who were so healthy, one of the more traumatic experiences of my life, and I'm going to say a life-changing event, was I was at a local gym in a community center, and this huge bodybuilder was there, and he was lifting, and he collapsed. And there was a physician there, an ER physician, who instantly knew what had happened. Anyhow, it's not something that could be fixed with CPR or anything like that. He would have had about, I've heard different numbers, 15 minutes to 30 minutes to get on an operating table, and he passed away. And it was very much a life-changing experience in my life when I saw that. And I'm like, how could he of all people? What? You know? And then you realize, and you start asking questions, and I started doing research, and then I kind of begged my way into a few research projects, you know, and I got very involved in that. And I started learning, and I started understanding that what we teach people is so superficial and not even scratching the surface. And what I wanted to do is to teach people, well, let's get to those roots. Let's understand, you know, why is there so much cancer? Why is there so much heart disease? Women always think breast cancer is the #1 killer of women. It is not. Heart disease is the #1 killer of women. And when we take a look, and when we talk about stress and stress release, that's especially annoying to me, because people talk about stress release. Okay, I'm going to have some wine. I'm going to have a cigarette. Worst thing in the world, because you're increasing chronic inflammation. But that's the way our minds and bodies have been trained. When you understand what's a craving and where does a craving come from inside the body, we always think our body is telling us the right thing. Well, you know what? Our bodies don't often tell us to sit down and have a bowl of broccoli. Okay. You know, unfortunately, it tells us to sit down and have a bowl of ice cream, or have a cigarette, or whatever, or treat yourself. You know, and so that's, you know, how I started getting more and more involved in it.
Yeah, I recently read so many studies on a gene expression. You mentioned that, you know, in your conversation, you know, it's not a genes, that it's a gene expression that is different, and, you know, but that's a whole different topic. We can talk about that topic but because I read a lot of articles on that it's not a genes that are different, you know, tree could have the same genes as us, but it's a gene expression is more important, how they express themselves. I think we could have a different podcast on that, you know, totally talk different discussion, but very interesting. Get, your journey to finding out, and your growth into that, and becoming an expert on the subject. This, I think a lot of people, when they see that, it's caused a lot of work, and people hesitate. Hey, listen, I want to learn it, but I don't want to just make my lifestyle out of it, right? So,
and you've got
very
to be
interesting.
really careful where you learn it. Like, you really have to go to, I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone out there, but you really got to go to the research. You can't go to, hey, this guy has a very successful website. He makes a ton of money with his online services. It doesn't mean he's giving good advice.
Yeah.
Okay. He or she, excuse me. So, I mean, it's really important. There's a lot of misinformation out there, which is very, very heartbreaking. And I very often stumble on something I see people reading, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what you're telling people. And it's very disturbing. And, but people think, oh my gosh, well, he's got this really great big online business and he obviously knows what he's, no, it doesn't mean. It means he has really good search engine optimization on his site. It means that he's gotten himself known. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's dealing with this. Maybe he is, maybe he's not, but we really have to go to the source. And if you are learning with someone, make sure you go to the source. Make sure you see what the source of the science is.
Just because it's the internet doesn't have to be true.
It's like people, I heard this expression quite a while ago, and people go to Dr. Google.
Yeah.
And
treat themselves. Interesting.
Oh my goodness. I remember once I saw this cartoon of two women sitting down, obviously before the pandemic, sitting down over a cup of coffee. And one woman says to the others, well, according to the internet, I'm dead. Because, I mean, it's, you have to be really careful what you read.
Good stuff. People listening, usually our audience is business leaders or business owners. Any message you want to leave for them? Anything they should be looking into. If somebody wants to start looking into, where do they start, and how can they connect with you if they need to start the journey on and start educating the staff on health and wellness?
I would happily, if someone wants to reach out to me, I would more than happily steer them in the right direction. So my email is Shira, Shira, at bestincorporatehealth.com. Obviously, the website is bestincorporatehealth.com. And I think that what I'm encouraging employers to do is really take a hard look at what their health program is. And make sure you have a health program that people are actually participating in, not just the people who are already motivated to look after their health, but everybody. And you very often have to meet people where they are. You can't assume that they're going to go all the way over here. It's a continuum, and you have to find what motivates them, but really enough of this general superficial stuff, which we all can recite in our sleep. What we want to do is we want to encourage people to dig a lot deeper and to take a much deeper understanding of their health and what's going on inside them. Because what we see on the outside is not necessarily reflective of what's going on the inside.
Very interesting. You want to quickly talk about your Mylab Box as well? What is that about, Shira?
Mylab Box is a wonderful company, again, very much in line with my belief in taking charge of your health. And you can order test kits. I mean, yes, we've been very involved in COVID-19 and various COVID tests. But what that's about is home test kits for heart health, for metabolic function, for thyroid function, yes, sexually transmitted infections. We have a food sensitivity test. People have very often said, oh, I'm allergic to this and I'm allergic to this, but they have no science behind it. And so there's food sensitive, there's nutritional panels, toxicology. And what it does is it really encourages people to take a look at their health and understand it themselves. And if there's a result that isn't where it should be, then there's physicians behind the scenes who help people understand what the results are.
Very interesting. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, the email is the best source. I'm going to include that below the video as well, your email. Where else
Wonderful,
can
thank
they?
you.
Where else they can connect with you? How could they reach out to you? Just the email is the main
Yeah,
source
I
of
would say
connection.
probably emails by far the best way to get me.
Sure.
I'm very good about responding to emails, and phone isn't so great because I'm usually on
Okay.
the phone in a meeting or on a Zoom or something like that.
It's
And always tell me the best time for me to connect with you. If you
mhm,
want to set up a meeting, like I have a Calendly link there,
mhm.
but people can set up a meeting with me or tell me. Some people I know don't like Calendly, that's fine. They can just email me and tell me, okay, these are the times I'm available, and I'll get right back to them.
Very interesting. Elsa, I learned so much from our discussion. It was totally different perspective and a lot of things, especially with the information. A lot of a lot of value. Learned so much, but I encourage all business leaders who are watching. They should reach out to you, just for conversation and and find out what they
I
need to do
welcome it.
for their staff. So I think
Absolutely.
yeah, they should all reach out to you, have a chat with you, and then who knows, take it from there.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for time, Shira.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.